The Lotus Sutra says, Shariputra said to the dragon girl, you suppose that in this short time you have been able to attain the unsurpassed way? But this is difficult to believe. Why? Because a woman's body is soiled and defiled, not a vessel for the law. She cannot be a Buddha. The Quran says, but those wives from whom you fear arrogance, first advise them, then if they persist, forsake them in bed, and finally strike them. And the Bible says, if a man is caught in the act of raping a young woman who is not engaged, he must pay 50 shekels of silver to her father. Then he must marry the young woman because he violated her, and he will never be allowed to divorce her. If you're a woman and you defend your religious beliefs, we want to hear from you. We want to know why you think it's okay for you to be subordinate to men, why you should be called defiled, why your husband should be allowed to beat you, why you are the property of your father to be sold if you become spoiled goods. I think that's horrendous. And I think the men in your religion are weak for taking that attitude towards women. I'm an atheist. I stand up for the voice of women. They aren't my property. They aren't to be called defiled or sold like commodities. You have a voice, and we want to hear it. Give us a call because the show is starting now. Welcome to Talk Heathen. Today is Sunday, September the 10th, 2023. Tomorrow, it will be 22 years since 4 planes were hijacked and used to attack the World Trade Center. The Pentagon and a 4th plane that passengers regained control of, which crashed into a field in Pennsylvania. The attacks were carried out by Al-Qaeda, an extremist Islamic group. There were approximately 3,000 casualties. Beliefs matter, people. They really, really do. Our thoughts are with the friends and families of the victims. I am your host, Richard Gilliver, and today joining me is Jimmy Jr. Jimmy, how are you, sir?
Hey, Richard, I am great. It is a beautiful rainy day over here in New York, and I'm happy to be here with you instead of outside and all that. How are you doing?
I'm great. You know what? For those out there who don't know, aren't aware, Jimmy is the newest member of our hosting team here at Talk Heathen. So I'm very, very excited to be working with him today, dropping him in deep on his first day working with the boss. we'll see how he gets on. But yeah, it's really looking forward to Jimmy. If you've seen him before as a guest on this show, you will know he has lots and lots of good things to say. Talk Heathen is a product of the atheist community of Austin, a 501c3 non-profit organization dedicated to the promotion of atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, and the separation of religion and government. Talk Heathen is a live call-in show, and we have open lines. So get your calls in on 512-991-9242 or from your computer, tiny.cc/callth. Now, every week we have a question of the week, which we like to call Talk Heathen to Me. And we want to give you last week's result of Talk Heathen to Me before we get started. So last week, we asked you, what was Jesus really doing from the age of 12 to 30? Number 3 is Tim Bigler. What was Jesus doing? Probably a lot of sinning. That's what part of his life was redacted. Jimmy, what do you think about that one?
Yeah, there's got to be a reason why, we can't look back on Jesus. He's definitely covering something up. There's something that they're hiding from us. And hopefully someday, we get another testament. We'll figure it all out.
Hopefully it's not like the last testament we got, the one that Joseph Smith gave us, because that was crap. Number 2 is Dragon Cone Games. From ages 12 to 30, Jesus ran away and joined the circus, which is where he learned how to do all of his cool tricks. Jimmy definitely had a trick or two, didn't he?
Yeah, he sure did. Hide and seek is probably his greatest skill.
Absolutely. If you're a theist out there and you think he's visited you and he's actually shown himself to you in playing hide and seek, please give us a call and let us know. The number one answer was from Rational Pair, who said, pretty sure Jesus did a few years backpacking in South America, building Inca stone structures with perfect no-grout joints that archaeologists still can't explain. Ancient aliens? was just Jesus sowing his wild oats. Wow, there's a lot to unpack in that one, Jimmy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's why we have the map up in the background. We are actively looking for Jesus. Where is Jesus hiking today?
Yeah, where is Jesus hiking today? Indeed. The prompts for next week is, what is a sin Jesus didn't intend to die for? Enter your best answer below the video in the comments, and next week we will reveal the top 3 answers. But I've got to ask Jimmy the question as well, haven't I? What is a sin Jesus didn't intend to die for?
You know, I think there are just some things you don't do. And had Jesus known that this was going to unfold the way it did, he might not have been so willing to sacrifice himself. But there have got to be at least 10,000 different pizza places around the world that claim to be authentic New York pizza. And I will tell you that, I got to stamp blasphemy on that one. There's just no way that sin should be being committed.
Okay, so full disclosure, I'm very good friends with Cynthia McDonald, the non-profit's host and producer, who is from Chicago. So I am not getting involved in any pizza wars between Chicago and New York. I'm staying right out of that one.
Yeah. Well, you should. It's fine for Cynthia and I to beef over who's got the best pizza, but outsiders are not welcome in that conversation.
Absolutely. I mean, if you want me to be on your side, by all means, take me out for a pizza in your given city, and I will no doubt be on your side in that argument. We have a super chat already from our good friend Greg Mikowski for $5, who says, "Welcome, Jimmy. Thanks for the show, Jimmy and Richard." Absolutely.
Thank you.
It's an absolute pleasure. We do still have open lines, so if anybody out there wants to give us a call about pizza, holy pizza, or their religion of choice and why we should believe it, please do give us a call. Jimmy, we were talking a little bit about the 9/11 attacks, and how that is something that is informed by belief. What kind of is your take on that whole thing, that whole kind of believing something to be true and being willing to die for it?
Well, my take on that is that, first of all, it's incredibly unfortunate because the perpetrators of such things are usually talked into it or convinced by somebody else, right? This kind of indoctrination often leads to abuse, and that abuse plays out as horrific attack like we saw in 9/11. I've seen it before. I was in New York when the towers hit. I was a young man at the time, but after that event had taken place, I ran up to the roof and watched them burn, and it was an event like nothing else I've ever witnessed before. And something about that, a quote about that, and I can't properly cite who that came from, but it's as far as someone who were to say, well, religion moves mountains. The quote I heard was, well, I don't know about moving mountains, but I have seen what it can do to skyscrapers. And I have to tell you, that was a very profound and impactful quote to hear. And I always kind of took that to heart. Everybody in my community growing up, we all lost somebody that day, or we knew somebody who lost someone. And it was a grieving process that we all went through as a society, whether we were directly involved in those attacks or not. And years later, going to Afghanistan 4 times, seeing kind of some of the atrocities that children and women were kind of talked into, and maybe some other men that volunteered or were coerced into wearing bombs or doing awful things in the name of religion. It certainly warrants a continued conversation. And so that is kind of a wrap up of all of my experiences. I had no idea that when the 9/11 attacks took place, I would someday find myself in the very country that they were planned. But it was a very full circle kind of feeling. And, we just need to keep encouraging people to challenge their beliefs. And that's why I'm here. And that's why I'm extremely grateful to be invited to work with you, Richard, and everybody at the ACA. And I really feel that my life has some meaning if I can have an impact in that way.
Yeah, absolutely, and we definitely appreciate your voice. That always kind of makes me chuckle a little bit when we get Christians, which we get quite often, saying, "Well, you know, they were willing, talking about early Christians, to die, so they must have believed it was true, as if that's some kind of evidence that it's that what they believe, the object of their belief, is actually true." And yet we've got a very, very real example of 9/11 from a completely different religion, which is saying, well, we are willing to die for this thing. And it seems so, it just seems so strange how they kind of go with that when there's such an obvious, such an historic example staring them straight in the face. It's not even like some kind of little obscure thing that's kind of tucked away in history. This was one of the major events of the last 100 years. And I remember where I was. It was one of those remember where you were when it happened moments. And anyone who lived through it knows where they were when this happens. And yet we still get Christians calling in, kind of citing this thing as though it's a purely Christian phenomena that people are willing to die, wouldn't be willing to die for what they believed in unless it was actually true. And that really, really puzzles me.
Yeah, I really like that connection that you make with the early Christians, because like the early Christians that were persecuted or that really believed it was true, just like the people who were able to be coerced into carrying out these atrocities, these religions become popular with people who are depraved, people who are kind of downtrodden, who need something higher to believe in. And so that part remains true across human history. There's always somebody that is willing to subscribe to a belief that offers them a way out of the current suffering that they're in. And so that was no different against the early Christians, who were offered kind of a way out. The promise of an afterlife was something new to the early Christians. And so it really helped foster the development and the growth of Christianity. And a lot of the people that we see who are coerced and indoctrinated into carrying out religious attacks and into extremism come from a place where there's really no other answers. And so I think there's a connection there. So for somebody to kind of posit, well, they must have believed it was true, we can posit back with, well, here are the reasons they probably believed it was true or wanted to believe it was true.
Yeah. And then on we are going to take a call in just a second, but on that same note, because I think this is also a very important point, which is often overlooked by many Christians making this argument, is that they will talk about the early Christians and the persecutions, and there were certainly persecutions against early Christians, but they will speak about it as if they were persecuted because they were specifically Christian. And in actual fact, they were largely persecuted because they were what was happening. They lived in a society which was a shared society. Lots of people had different gods. And what happened is there were this group of Christians who believed in these different gods to everyone else, and natural disasters were occurring. And they were persecuted, not specifically because of their Christian practice, but because they did not follow these other gods and they were seen as displeasing the gods. And that was the reason for the persecutions. And it's a very, very different reason to being specifically persecuted because of your Christian belief. And it's one of those very, very important subtleties, which I think is often overlooked. That. So if you've got an opinion on that, give us a call, and we are going to jump into calls. We have got Michael, him from Florida. Michael, how are you, sir? And what would you like to talk about?
Hi, guys. I'm calling because, I've sort of been in an agnostic space for a little while now. I started questioning my faith back in 2019, and, that kind of brought me into contact with a lot of the literature of different scholars and whatnot that, showed like the sort of the more human side of the development of Christianity or the Bible, the New Testament. I want to get straight to it, I guess. The thing I'm calling about is, I guess I'm hoping to see if you guys can give me any advice or counsel on dealing with sort of this recurrent fear of hell, because I was raised in a denomination that didn't even believe in eternal conscious torment. We believe in annihilation. But for some reason, not too long ago, actually, I had a dream or a nightmare about going to hell, and it was of the eternal torment sort. And that ever since then, I've been looking at videos that, whether it be skeptical videos or even Christian debates about what the nature of hell is. And I don't know, it's put me in a place where I can't self-diagnose, but I almost feel like I'm in a mode of depression because my appetite is gone. My body feels weak. I always want to sleep. The things that were fun for me have lost their savor. And I don't know. Sometimes it's I don't know what to do with my mind in terms of how do I deal with this, because there's always that part of my mind that's saying, "Oh, you just want to get this over with so you can sin, or you can not worry about responsibility." It's I don't know. My mind's a mess sometimes. I know you guys aren't therapists, but I was wondering if you guys have any sort of advice on dealing with that, if any.
Yeah, Jimmy, do you want to take it?
Yeah, sure. Well, Michael, I'm glad that you premised that we're not therapists or counselors. I don't want to give you the misconception that I have some kind of clinical answer or professional opinion in this matter where it comes to your mental health. I do think that you acknowledging that you might have a problem, though, is good, and your call or your issue that you're dealing with might be able to be divided into two separate things. So you having a fear of hell and maybe some of the other things that you're experiencing might not be related. You might be able to kind of get some help with this depression that you think you're experiencing and still examine this fear of hell that you have separately. But what I would say is you had a dream that you were going to hell, right? But did you ever have a dream that you were going to Hades? Did you ever have a dream that you were going to purgatory? I mean, did you ever have any kind of dream that came from a religion that you weren't raised in? And the answer is probably no. And so you have been, I would say, likely programmed to believe in certain things, and unprogramming or deprogramming, however you phrase it, is a difficult task, but it's one of repetition, or at least it requires constant repetition, and it kind of requires strength. It requires you to kind of snap out of it and say, okay, that's made up. I'm having a moment where I'm going through this programming and it's time to take a step back. We've all gone through it, I think, to a certain extent. For me, I think hell was one of the first, or fear of hell was kind of one of the first things that I was able to get rid of when I realized that I was an atheist. That it was difficult, right? It was a tough challenge, but I had to keep reminding myself, this is silly. I mean, the concept that we have of hell now is not even in the Bible. So there's one way to kind of look at it. And that's why they say reading the Bible is kind of a way to help people out of their religion and onto a path of, skepticism or atheism even, because these preconceived notions that we have that we grow up with, we find that the origins are kind of just a little asinine, and there's really no consistency with them. So I think that, just being strong, continuing to kind of question what it is you believe, you have to go look at the source. You have to open your Bible and read it. I think that is a good way for you to go on the religious front. On the mental health front, I want you to, continue to try and seek help on that in going down that path from a professional. And I think you're doing that. So good on you.
Okay.
Yeah, Michael, do you want to respond to Jimmy and then I'll jump in?
Sure. Yeah, I guess. Well, like I said, the thing that was weird for me, and this is kind of the confusing part, is like I said, I was raised Seventh-day Adventist specifically. I was raised in a denomination that preaches the doctrine of annihilationism, in that God ultimately destroys sinners and unbelievers. But then I just randomly I had this nightmare of the eternal conscious torment version of hell, which is something that I wasn't even particularly raised in. I'm like, okay, to be fair, I suppose my family was Roman Catholic when I was little, but then we became Seventh-day Adventist when I was about 4 years old. But the general thrust of my upbringing was the doctrine of annihilation when it came to the teaching of hell. And the fact that I had that nightmare not a few days ago, and it's been really pardon my language, but fucking me up for the past week or so, or past 2 weeks really. It's confusing. So it's I was only saying that in response to when you asked have I had a nightmare about Hades or something like that? It's not. It's not like to the degree of like me having a nightmare about an underworld from an entirely separate religion, but sort of like from a separate denomination. I don't know. So like I said, that was the weird thing for me, and it's like I have no idea why my mind is so stymied by this to the point that I can't, like, you know, even sometimes I feel like it's ruining my ability to even think critically about different topics when it comes to being skeptical about religion. So yeah, I really a question.
I really want to encourage you to have you heard of Recovering from Religion? They're someone who you can kind of give a call, who do have trained people who you can talk to coming out of religion, and they're really, really, really good. It was started by Dr. Darrell Ray, and you know, they've got people all over the world in all different time zones. There's always somebody there who you can talk to, and they're really, really good. They've also got I think this one was also started by Darrell Ray, the Secular Therapy Project, which is kind of Secular Therapy Project, which is kind of along the same lines. And you know, I encourage you wholeheartedly to go and kind of look at them and give them a call, especially Recovering from Religion. They are really, really good. We'll put the links are in the chat, and I'll also make sure the links are in the description of this show for you as well, if you want to kind of look back retroactively at that. But they're really good. It sounds to me like, you know, you'd really, really benefit from, you know, neither me or Jimmy are counselors. Jimmy gave you some great advice, but we aren't counselors. And it really seems to me like you would benefit from speaking to a counselor. And what Recovering from Religion can kind of ensure is that you can, if you go to a counselor, you're not going to a religious counselor who's just going to kind of reinform these things that you're going to a counselor for to begin with, which is not what you need. So I hugely, hugely recommend you go to Recovering from Religion. It sounds to me like they might, and I say I'm not a counselor, but this is just kind of listening to you and Jimmy speak. It sounds to me like you might have some kind of underlying thing, which isn't the might not necessarily be the fear of hell itself. It might be that that's just kind of be triggered this underlying response that you might have. So I think, you know, speaking to somebody who is a professional and who maybe to dig into that a little bit further would be very, very beneficial to you. You know, it's strange to me how this, because you said you didn't have this kind of fear of a hellfire, but it's this which has caused all the kind of the fear in you. So it's was there any kind of particular trigger other than just this nightmare which started this kind of path off?
I've been trying to think on that for a while. It's because I was really confused as to why my mind is even going there. Like I remember even when I was more devout, like before 2019, I would always look at the people who believed in eternal torment as woefully deceived, or they're believing in a false doctrine and stuff like that. But nonetheless, I think I'm only pontificating here, but I think it may have something to do with when I was like reading different articles about because a friend of mine, I practice martial arts, and a friend of mine once was telling me, who used to be in the same martial arts class, that martial arts is evil, it's satanic, and blah blah. And I was looking at an article from a Christian website about whether or not martial arts is evil, and on that same website, the martial arts thing is kind of a side topic, but on that same website, I saw a link to an article that was teaching that annihilationism is unbiblical, and I don't know. I think it may have triggered something within me with respect to me, like, I don't know if intimidated is the word, or yeah, I guess intimidated by strongly worded imposition of a doctrine or something like that. I don't know. I feel like I'm learning things about myself, about my own psyche, and about my own temperament as I'm going through all this. But if anything, I would guess it was probably that put that seed in my head. And then my mind is kind of like racing through all the, what if I'm wrong? What if I'm incorrect? Because like one of the biggest things I've been dealing with when it comes to my skepticism is, how do I tell my mom? How do I tell my family? How do I address that, because my elder brother, who's always been more extroverted, more strong-willed, has let my mom know that he himself is basically a skeptic, and I'm not sure if he's called himself an atheist. He seems agnostic, and I can tell how much that's upset my mom. And I don't want to be like, oh, by the way, your other son is also not a believer.
Yeah, Michael. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think we're at a good point to kind of reflect on some of the things that you just said. So you may have been brought up with this annihilationism being the primary course of action that would happen, to you or to any non-believers. However, you were raised in the United States, a predominantly Christian nation that preaches hell to non-believers and to sinners in all walks of life. I mean, you saw it yourself in a magazine. You hear it about martial arts. You hear it. I mean, it's kind of everywhere we go, right? So, and even in your questioning of what it is you believe and what the possible outcomes could be, even though you weren't raised in hell, I mean, it's close enough to Christianity and close enough to kind of the things that you grew up with that it's certainly had some kind of impact on you. You don't want to let your family down. You don't want to be wrong about this. And I think that lingering fear of being punished is not only a legitimate fear to have, considering you were raised in a dogma, but that's how the religion keeps people, because they go through this psychological kind of back and forth that is really unhealthy. And ultimately it's kind of designed that way. And so I would say that, kind of focusing on that and maybe not so much the nuanced differences that you and I are talking about, annihilism versus hell versus et cetera, et cetera. The fact is, you were raised to believe that any thoughts that you're having now are wrong and will be met with severe punishment. And it's understandable that you're going through this emotional event, if you will.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, Michael, can I just quickly ask you, do you currently practice any form of religion?
No, not really. I'm like, I've kind of, like I said, I've kind of been quiet about my own skepticism for, with my mom at least, for a while now. I've talked to a few of my siblings about it, but I don't really practice any religion. At least not actively. I haven't ever since probably about 2020. Because in 2019 I started questioning things, and then certain religious habits like tithing and going to church kind of fell off, especially when the pandemic hit.
Yeah. Okay, so I think, I think what I'd probably make a small suggestion, which has nothing to do with your kind of your therapy as such, but I would kind of make the small suggestion that if you're not actually practicing any religion and this kind of thing is inducing trauma into you, it might be better off to kind of step away from the reading things up on websites and watching the debates and things for a little while until you've had time to work things out internally, because you don't want to keep kind of throwing fuel onto the fire and reinvigorating this trauma. And I do want to repeat again, and I will never stop repeating this to people in your situation, to please contact Recovering from Religion, because they do have trained therapists. They will be able to kind of help walk you through this process a lot better than we can on this show.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Final words, Michael. Anything else you want to say before we let you go?
I don't know. I suppose maybe it's just a little bit cathartic thing to say, but sometimes I've considered even like maybe in order to dispel this fear, this anxiety, this all-encompassing anxiety, is to perhaps try religion again. But then sometimes the thing that makes me hesitant to do that is that it feels somewhat disingenuous, because the way I feel about that whole doctrine is like God is like holding a gun to my head of eternal consequence and saying, smile and worship me. And I don't know, it just feels so weird just to claim to love an entity like that. But
religious trauma is unfortunately a real thing, and I've never been religious. I cannot relate to that kind of anxiety coming up, but all I can do is say, please call Recovering from Religion. Go and have a look on the website, give them a call, and they will really, really be able to help you. The links are in the chat. I'll make sure the links are in the show description as well when we post this up onto YouTube. So you've got that information and those resources there. Michael, I'm going to let you go. Feel free to call us back anytime and give us an update. And yeah, thank you very much for your call.
Thanks, Michael.
Yeah, that was a difficult one. It's calls like that are especially difficult for me because I've never been in that situation, and it's so hard to kind of for me to relate to someone like that. I have empathy for them, but it's so hard to actually relate to how they're actually feeling because I've never had to go through that process myself.
I think just us being able to be here and facilitate that conversation for him, that's probably a big step for him. Having that conversation, because he said, he's been keeping his skepticism to himself, at least where it comes to his family, and that could weigh on somebody. So I'm happy to have those conversations. Yeah,
absolutely. Okay, we have a super chat from Ben9 for $9.99. And he has supplied no message with that. But thank you very, very much, Ben, for that super chat. And if you want to support Talk Heathen and the ACA, you can do so. We have a brand new, exciting way to support the ACA. You can buy a brick and become part of the library's legacy. And check out this video.
Have you ever wanted to make a permanent impact on the atheist community of Austin? Help support our space for free thought by buying a custom engraved brick to be laid on the building grounds to help raise funds for improvements. Our building has stood as a beacon for years, bringing people together. But 3 years of emptiness due to the pandemic have taken a toll, leaving it in disrepair. Help us restore this hub of connection and support by buying a brick. Moses had his stone tablets, but we're doing our own version. Join our brick fundraiser and let your engraved messages stand the test of time. Minus commandments. Visit tiny.cc/ACA bricks for more information.
Yeah, that's so cool. We also have a limited edition t-shirt that we have every month. This month says Jesus can't answer prayers because the Wi-Fi in heaven sucks. Visit tiny.cc/merchaca to get them now. And like the video and subscribe to the channel, enable notifications and comment below on your favorite caller. I go through the comments every single week. I really do read every single one of them. So if you want to have your messages heard, they are definitely heard, I can assure you. And you can become a channel member. You can click the join button below the video. You'll get custom chat emotes and you will be able to help perpetuate the mission of Talk Heathen and the atheist community of Austin. And you can send a super chat like some people already have done with a question or comment, and we will read as many as we can. We have some calls lining up. I'm going to bring in Kyle from Indiana, and he wants to talk about that there should be lines drawn on abortion. Kyle, hello.
Hello. Thanks for taking my call. I saw the poll question, and I'm not sure if murder is the right term because murder means unlawful. But if we want to talk about the abortion and when it's right and when it's wrong, I do have a couple opinions on that.
Okay.
Abortion tends to be a very broad term. It can last from conception all the way to birth, and I think that there should be some lines drawn as far as at what point does this fetus become a baby? Or, in a better way of saying that, becomes a human with rights, at least the United States. So that's where I'm at. I don't believe abortion should be legal across the board. I do think it's something that should be decided by a doctor. But I just, this idea that we can abort a fetus, baby, child through its full term just doesn't settle right with me.
I don't think this is something that occurs, is it? I think we have that line in place already.
Where does a unborn child get aborted at full term?
There have been several examples, at least in modern times, that that a child has went well into the third a pregnancy has went into the third trimester and the baby is aborted, at least here in the United States.
Okay,
I
don't know of any off the top of my head.
that.
I admit, like I think it's a horrible thing, right? You know, I would love to see children be born and you know, everybody have a good life. I don't know what the nuances are as far as how far a child goes and where. But you said something incredibly interesting to me, or to Richard and I, when we were introducing this, and said, you know, you do think it should be made by a medical professional, period. And I don't know where you're wrong about that. I mean, what we know now of abortion laws is that they are being made typically by elected officials or judges that, you know, kind of sit for life on a court. And really the medical professional and the person who is hosting the life inside of them are being cut out of the decision-making process. And so I think that is what the debate is about. Drawing lines on abortion could very well be a product of having the ability to make that decision with your medical provider. But that is not even something that's possible right now. And so I think it's two kind of different conversations in a way. I don't know. What do you think about those thoughts so far, Kyle?
Well, you say, and yes, medical professionals should make the decision, but there are several regulations. The only people that can make laws are our politicians and legislatures. So there are current regulations put on medical professionals as far as what they can and can't do. So yes, it's their decision, but there has to be guidelines for them to fall within. I mean, doctors can't just give you any medication for any ailment. They have certain things they have to do, and it's through FDA regulation, at least I believe, here in the United States. So to say it is slightly a tangent subject, but you can't have a legal stance without getting politicians and legislature involved.
But the legals, the kind of this all came to a head pretty recently with the whole Roe versus Wade being overturned, and that was specifically a political decision, and you know, regardless of which side of the fence you're on, it was a political decision, and it's the medical professionals since then have kind of had their hands tied as to what they can do. Certainly in some states, you've got states like Florida, which are renowned for being absolute. I mean, I don't live in Florida. Jimmy can probably speak more on this than I can. But you know, who absolutely kind of appalling with kind of sticking in legislation which vastly undermines both doctors and people who are pregnant. Jimmy, you can speak probably a little bit more on Florida than I can. Did you notice anything down there?
Well, I did live in Florida, and in Florida, you know, it's a tradition, or typically more Christian and more conservative, and so there are a lot of outspoken people and protests and things like that for making abortion illegal, period. What I found interesting about that was that these same people, when there was talks about having possibly a COVID vaccination becoming mandated, were standing out on the corners in the same place with signs that said, "My body, my choice." And I found it incredibly hypocritical to want to take rights away from somebody else over their own body, but then protest the very same argument for your own body. And so we always see this kind of thing happen with the more conservative Christian demographic. And I just don't really understand why they can't make the connection between abortion and having your own rights when they're experiencing those same fears and that same government toiling in their personal rights. So, yeah, we're not at a point where we can have conversations about you know, the legal limits or what doctors are capable of. There is a monolithic line drawn in the United States here. As to where abortion or where Roe v. Wade has been overturned and states can take those rights away from people at will, not taking into account the circumstances of individual cases, the changing circumstances. I mean, we might sit here and say, well, it would be horrible to see an 8-month child not come to term, an 8-month pregnancy not come to term. But we aren't in the room with the doctor, with the pregnant woman, and unfortunately, neither are they, in a sense, right? So we're just not in a place where we can start drawing lines. We have to actually work backwards now. And I just want to close this out with, if you have any questions about COVID, refer to the CDC guidelines.
Okay, and if I may, isn't it just as equally hypocritical for somebody that's for mandatory vaccines, claiming bodily autonomy, then turning around and saying, well, I have the right to an abortion? I mean, there's hypocrisy on both sides of this argument. And that, I think, is what makes it so complex to even get to any rational discussion on the subject, because it does seem like it is very divided. You either have people that are pro-abortion or anti-abortion. I tend to fall in the middle of that and believe there's probably an appropriate time for it, but then there are also times that it is immoral. I mean, we're taking the life of potentially another human being. And in that, you're violating that person's rights to life and due process as far as that goes.
When did this become an anti-vax call? Let's not go down the anti-vax route, because
sorry, I did that. That's my bad.
Okay. Let's kind of try and stay on project, especially seeing as that anti-vax route is kind of a sore point with me because my mum died of COVID. So let's not do that, because you'll get quite a lot of pushback on that. And she was an anti-vaxxer as well. Yeah. But I think on the subject we're talking about, look, I'd like to see these cases you kind of cite in the third trimester, because I think it's very rare that anything happens in the third trimester which isn't kind of a medical emergency. And it's abortion is a nuanced issue. It's not just a case of, oh, someone walks in and decides, oh, suddenly they don't want a baby, and then that's it. There are cases of that which happen early in pregnancy, which are the person's right who is pregnant. But in later pregnancy, it's usually down to kind of medical emergencies and things. So let's not just kind of throw everything in one basket and say abortion bad. You're kind of called in with saying, let's draw a line. And as I said at the top of the call, I think there are lines in place. And I think that's very important to acknowledge. And it's also, while we're kind of us three guys talking on the subject, I think it's all very important to acknowledge that neither of us, none of the three of us are likely ever going to actually be pregnant. So, it's not a thing that we can talk on really from any authority at all. I'm not a medical professional. I don't think Jimmy is. I'm not sure about the caller, Kyle, but
I am not either.
Yeah, so I think it's a very important subject to kind of have discussions about. But personally, I would feel much more comfortable if there was kind of an expert in the room kind of thing to have that discussion with, whether it's someone who is likely to become pregnant or has the ability to become pregnant, or a medical professional who has to deal with this. And I think the biggest point that I've been trying to make through this kind of entire thing is they're not the people who are making the decisions. It's the politicians who are making the decisions. And that's where my kind of pushback on this whole thing comes. And, I kind of agree with what you said earlier on in a way, Kyle, when you said, it is the medical profession, it should be the medical professional and the pregnant person who are making these decisions, but it's not. It's legislation, which is largely informing how we go forward with this. So, I think there is a line in place. In some ways, I agree with you. In others, I don't. I'd have to look into it a lot more. But I'd also like to have someone in the room with us who does know a lot more about it. I recommend you phone back when Dr. Ben's on. He'll be on in a couple of weeks, and I think if you give us a call back, keep your eye on it and set a reminder and give us a call back when Dr. Ben's on, who can really probably give you some informed information on this subject. I'll let you kind of have the last word, Kyle, and then we'll let you go.
Okay, I appreciate that. Just to come back to what you just said about medical professionals, there are medical professionals on both sides of this argument. There are OBGYNs that are absolutely against abortion, and then there are others that are for it. So if you're going to have medical professionals, you should probably have one from both sides of the line. I'm not going to take up any more time because I don't think we're really going to go any farther with this conversation. I just wanted to call because it was the poll question. I have an opinion on it, even though I will never be pregnant. And I thought I would just lay my opinion out here, since that's what this show is sort of all about. And
yeah, absolutely.
For your time. You gentlemen have a great afternoon.
Yeah, you too, and stick around to listen to the next caller because this might inform you a little bit more as well. Thanks for your call, Kyle. I'm going to bring the next caller in on the same subject just shortly. But before we do that, I'm just going to let you know you can support us on Patreon by going to tiny.cc/PatreonTH. And we now have a channel that houses all of the shows of the ACA in audio podcast form. Visit tiny.cc/AEN podcasts. You can become a part of the Talk Heathen community in our fan room Facebook page at tiny.cc/FPTHG. And also, in case you didn't know, Talk Heathen has a TikTok. And we, when I say we, it's usually me, will be going there live before the shows on a Sunday. So go and subscribe and join the pre-show Talk Heathen TikTok. We have got some calls lining up. As promised, though, let's keep it on the same subject and bring possibly a different side of the argument in with Marsha. She, her, Marsha. Marsha, are you there?
Hello, I'm here.
Hello.
Hey, Marsha.
So you're calling on the abortion topic as well, and you want to clear up some misinformation that people use to justify a pro-life stance.
Yeah, I missed a chunk of the conversation because I was immediately called in because I was triggered by the very first comment the previous caller made about abortions late in the term. And honestly, like, they do happen. And the reason they happen is that something's gone horribly wrong. People don't get pregnant and then go into labor and say, oops, I changed my mind and I don't want this baby anymore. Let's have an abortion. That is not a thing at all. Like, it's usually a pretty dire emergency when that happens. And so if you take that away, if you make that illegal, you put women and infants, fetuses, all at risk. You destroy families and you destroy lives that way. And honestly, I also don't think, it's not a doctor's decision most of the time either. The person in charge of the of the body that is carrying the child, it's their body and their life that's at stake. And it just is so ghoulish, in my opinion, to say, well, this needs to be mediated through a doctor. Like, why? Why does the doctor have a say in it?
I think sometimes it's important to have a doctor's input, especially.
Hello?
Hi, Marsha, are you there?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
The
Hi.
audio cut
Yeah,
out.
sorry, that was me. I was muted. Sorry, rookie mistake. I think it's I think it's important to. I'm going to get a right slap on the hand for that after the show. I think it's important sometimes to involve the doctor, and because I've been in the position before where I've been in hospital and I've thought that something might be good for me, and the doctor's professional opinion, and rightly so, has overridden my stance on the subject. So I kind of agree with you for the most part, but I do think every time there's kind of a medical situation going off, we can't just kind of overrule the doctor based on our opinion of the subject out of hand. I think it has to be informed. I think, in a medical emergency, especially, which is kind of what you were talking about, the doctor's opinion is kind of vitally important, regardless of our own wishes. But I'm on the same page with you in general. I did want to ask you, because you were talking about kind of late term stuff. What is your opinion on abortion overall?
Overall, I don't think there is any reason to restrict it. And mostly for that reason, that, like, honestly, the majority of abortions take place between 6 and 10 weeks. And, like, I guess sometimes it's framed as, like, this situation where a doctor needs to be involved in that decision. And, like, they need to be involved in, facilitating the abortion. But the decision is the woman's.
Well, yeah, and nobody's saying that decision should be taken away from the woman, but it should be made with the advice of a medical professional, right? Especially if the medical professional is performing it. These things need to be guided along, and I think it's just a smart practice because we want to ensure the health and welfare of the woman who is pregnant.
Sure.
Kind of the point I was making earlier when we got a little off topic is that we know that there are people out there that understand the concept of bodily autonomy because they apply it in other areas. But when it comes to abortion, for some reason, we are taking that assistance away from the doctors, tying their hands. And these people who we know understand the concept of bodily autonomy are the politicians that are restricting a woman from making these decisions. And so it's a very backwards concept. It doesn't logically follow. And it really doesn't logically follow from the standpoint of religion. When people cite religion and Christianity as the source for their pro-life stance, they clearly haven't read the Bible and seen what happens to children in the Bible. In general. So it's just a conversation that kind of needs to be, I guess, made more available to people who haven't really been as well informed as they could be. But like I said earlier, we're not in a position right now, unfortunately, where we can start discussing the nuances of how and when a doctor can assist, because the politicians have really taken that responsibility away.
Yeah, Marsha. Go on.
It's upsetting because I just don't think politicians should have their hand in this at all. And anyway, I'm sorry.
You got to vote. You got to stay informed.
Yeah. Agitate. Serious thing.
Yeah. Marsha, I really, really appreciate your input. I think it's, as I said during the last call, neither me nor Jimmy are medical professionals or are likely to become pregnant. So it's great to have that other kind of voice in here, giving us that other side of it. And I, for one, very, very much appreciate your call and you kind of giving your voice to this conversation.
Thank you. Can I say one more thing too? Another kind of misconception that's been out there on the pro-life side about how traumatic supposedly abortions are. I've had an abortion, in my younger days, and medical abortions didn't exist then. It was not painful. It was not traumatic. The recovery was easy. And the main thing I felt was relief. And I think that is most women's experience with it. You know, we're not stupid. We're not ignorant. We know what we need for our lives. And, you know, someone trying to tell you, oh, you'll be just so traumatized and so in pain, those are lies. They're outright lies.
Yeah, I think the thing is that these people who are so kind of so anti-abortion in every respect, they're not bothered that they're telling lies. They've no experience of it. They don't know what it's like. They're not going on facts and figures. They're going on purely emotional arguments, often informed by their religious beliefs, and that is kind of overriding everything else that is factual in any way. And unfortunately, this is how a lot of these people kind of argue and push forward opinion. It's based on emotion, and it is sad when they've not actually been in the position when they're telling other people, especially when the men and they're telling other people that you know, if you have an abortion, you will feel this and you will feel this regret and you will feel that, and you know, all these other things. Keep your fucking nose out, sir. It's none of your business. You know, when you're able to have a baby, then you know you have a right to kind of jump in and start telling, or at least having a conversation with other people about what it might be like. But until you're ever going to be in that position, then, you know, just turn away from it and let, you know, people do what they need to do, I think is kind of my opinion on it. Marsha, do you want to have the kind of last word before we let you go?
I don't know if I think I've said everything I can think of off the top of my head. I kind of called on the hair trigger.
No, it's cool. Thank you very much. I will let you go. Thank you very much for your call. Like I said, I think having that other voice is really, really, really important. Jimmy, I'm sure you appreciate that voice being in the conversation as well.
I do. And you know what, Richard, I kind of wanted to posit just one more thing too on that. So I think that a misconception that might be not all that clear is that people paint abortion as if it's maybe some really easy decision, but there's a lot of weight on people that have to go through that. And I've never been in that situation. My wife and we did lose a pregnancy, and it was awful, absolutely awful. And I wish more people could kind of be sympathetic, you know, to or empathetic to those that have to make a decision like that.
Yeah. And and I've been in the same position. Me and my wife lost our what would have been our second child as well. So, but that's not abortion, and that's the thing. We need to kind of make that distinction as well. That, you know, although this can be something which can be traumatic for the person who has made the mind up and is going through it, it's not necessarily the case that they're going to be traumatized by it. And that's kind of the point I was trying to push. Ben9 has sent us yet another super chat, and that is for $4.99, and this further $4.99, I should say. Thank you, Ben. And this time they have sent a message, which is great show. Thanks, guys, for releasing me from an irrational, nonsensical concept of religion. Thank you very much for your support, Ben9. And look, we don't release people. We just share. We just talk to people and share information. It's you guys, and like Jimmy and everyone else who's come out of religion, who've done the work themselves and got themselves out there. We're just there to facilitate the conversations. Jimmy is now going to learn what the guest host has to go through when we get to the top 5 patrons, because, sir, I would like you to read out the top 5 patrons.
Well, I actually have done this before. I'm not quite a pro, but I always love saying this one. Dingleberry Jackson, of course, always welcome, and always like the opportunity to say that. Dion Lachey, Oops, all singularity. Davor Valjean, and Kalevi Helveti. I did a lot better on that one than my first attempt. And then honorable mention, Vernon Grainer. So thanks everybody for being top patrons and staying in tune with us, and keep supporting us.
That Vern guy, I'm sure I know him from somewhere. I can't quite put my finger on where it is. The ACA wants you, that's you, to know what is going on in our community. And for that, we've got an updated website. Head to www.atheist-community.org, where you can learn about the organization itself, its policies, and how you can get involved. We want to hear from you. We want to know what you liked and what you thought was effective, and more importantly, what you thought we can do better. So email tv@atheist-community.org and let us know what you think. We have got some calls building up. Wow. Okay, we've got a couple more abortion calls. I'm going to skip over them for the while, but stay on the line. We will get to you. We'll try and get to you. Let's kind of change the tone a little bit and go with Nick, him from New York, who wants to talk about religious experiences. Nick, are you there?
I'm here. Thanks so much for taking my call.
Not a problem. What would you like to talk about?
Well, I've identified myself as an agnostic atheist. I've felt different ways about that atheist label over the years because, long ago I thought that atheist meant sort of a materialist, hard atheist. And I took that line for a while. And then I sort of opened my mind and realized, well, in the same way that religious people are sort of being arrogant, overstepping, thinking they know what's out there, I felt like in the same way I ought to be more agnostic. And I've sort of come full circle because I see how the community is using the word atheist, where it sort of encompasses having that agnostic, open attitude. So I don't at all suspect that the biblical God is real or anything like that. But at the same time, I don't assume that I know the ultimate nature of time, space, and being. You know what I mean? So I think of myself as atheistic, but also open to learning more about what all of this is. That makes sense, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, it says in the call notes you want to talk about spiritual experiences. Do you have specific experiences you're struggling with?
It's not that I'm struggling with anything, but, I listen to your show and other shows on this channel. I hear a lot of people calling in, people who are religious, testifying to their own experiences and saying, well, I know this is real because of the experiences I've had. And the usual line, which I agree with, is that they're misattributing those experiences, that the experience may be genuine, but that doesn't mean that it's attributable to a spirit or a God. And I guess what's been on my mind is, all right, given that we're not going to attribute it to a spirit or a God, maybe there's still something worth looking at here. Whatever people are experiencing when they meditate or even when they pray or whatever these religious practices are yielding is something that people consider to be inspiring, something life-changing. And I guess what I've been wondering more and more is, how do we incorporate some of those discoveries into our own lives without buying into a theistic cosmology or believing in the mythology of the Bible? Without gods and spirits, is there still something here? Is there some practice through which we can develop, for lack of a better word, a spirituality? I mean, I know that sometimes we bristle at the word spiritual because it presumes that there's a spirit. But maybe we need new words then. Maybe we need new language.
I think we need new words, or certainly to just to exchange a word like spiritual for something like inspired or inspiring. People look at the universe and think it's a spiritual experience. I look at the universe and I'm absolutely filled with awe. Spiritual has too many connotations for me, and I think it's far too often when we kind of people are throwing the word spiritual out about, it becomes so difficult because it becomes one of those situations where half of the time you're trying to figure out what they actually mean. And there are other words that we have, which we can use, which are, make perfectly good sense in the situation without invoking spiritual. I've been doing Buddhist meditation for many, many years, well over 2 decades now. And, there's no spiritual aspect to that for me whatsoever. It's great. It's calming. It's introspective. It allows me to kind of push things aside and like biases and things aside easier than if I wasn't partaking in that. But I don't consider it a spiritual practice whatsoever. And I think there are many things like that, whether it's Buddhist meditation. Some people like to kind of take recreational drugs. Some people like to kind of go for a run. Some people like to just look at the sky and wonder at how amazing and how big the universe is. And there are lots of things we can kind of do to invoke those feelings without kind of jumping onto the spirit train or the spiritual train. I don't think we need to do it all. And Sam Harris is one of these people a lot of people kind of hugely admire. And it annoys the hell out of me when I hear him use the word spiritual, because everything he can do, he can remove that word. That word is not necessary for those kind of feelings to be invoked or those practices to be undertaken. And for me personally, it's kind of a redundant thing, which just causes confusion when you're talking to people. Lots of people have many different ideas about spirituality and the definition of spirituality. So why not just get rid of the word anyway and just use something more appropriate?
Yeah, I don't disagree with anything you said. I think actually you and I are on the same page based on everything that you've just said. I agree that the word spiritual has a lot of unnecessary baggage in the way that the word God does. I mean, some people try to reclaim the word God. They say, well, I believe that everything is God. They take a sort of pantheist line. And they may not believe anything very different cosmologically than we mean. They're trying to reclaim the word. I agree with you that it tends to confuse people because the word has an existing meaning. So I agree with that. I guess what I wish is that everything you were talking about now with Buddhist meditation and feeling awe about nature, it's not that we don't talk about these things. I guess I just wish that there were even more discourse around that between theists and atheists, because when theists come to us and say, well, where do you get your sense of purpose? Where do you get your sense of meaning? I feel like the kind of materialist atheist who just replies by talking about atoms and molecules isn't answering the question. I think we need to have a sort of robust...
Who does that, though? Who really does that? Because I've never heard any atheist answer that question with that. You know, the closest I've got to that is people talking about how the dogs or the children inspire them. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say, well, you know, in a really kind of dry, professorish manner, well, there is nothing really inspiring because everything out there is just atoms and molecules. And that's all we need to concentrate on. And meaning really has no place in any of our lives. You know, that doesn't happen. And I think that's a kind of a straw man that a lot of theists like to throw out there to trying to kind of give themselves the upper hand before these conversations begin. Jimmy, I want you to jump in because I've been talking a lot.
Sorry, you guys were. I was inspired by that conversation. You know, I didn't want to interrupt, but I think Nick makes a couple of good points, and there are some things that really caught me. So when you called in, you gave your intro. You said there really are some things that are worth looking into without kind of ascribing this higher power, you know, type thing to it. And then you just most recently mentioned that the word spiritual or the concept of spirituality has a lot of baggage. Well, first, what you're explaining sounds a lot like the scientific method. I mean, instead of just stopping short and ascribing something that is unproven, you know, we do need to look into them. But people end up with this kind of spirituality when they refuse to do that, right? Just deciding what the conclusion is without really giving it any kind of inspection is how we end up with this very nuanced approach to spirituality and this word that means so many different things, to the point where now we have to find a new word to really describe what we're talking about. So those were kind of just my footnotes on what I was hearing. Good points.
Yeah, Nick.
Yeah, well, so thanks a lot for taking my call. I don't think there's anything else I needed to say today. Keep doing the great work that you're doing. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you very
Thanks,
much
Nick.
for your call, Nick. Really appreciate it. And yeah, I think Nick touched on a good point as well. That it's, we don't always have these conversations in kind of this space. And I think sometimes it's down to the kind of the vacuousness of terms like that. And I think as much as I kind of disagreed with the kind of hard atoms and molecules line, I think sometimes it is because there are a lot of people in atheist spaces who do kind of want to make themselves kind of disassociated and make themselves appear kind of Vulcan like with coming from a logic standpoint, and they don't want to admit that there might be something that is awe-inspiring and bigger than them for probably the fear of being mistaken for saying that they think there's some kind of spiritual entity out there. I think it's fine to have that feeling. I think that feeling of wonder and awe is very important, and it's in all of us, and we are emotional creatures. Skepticism is very, very important, absolutely very important. But by the same token, we can't just disassociate itself from the fact that we are emotional creatures.
Yeah,
and we are going to feel inspiration and awe about things like that.
I have no problem associating with myself with the idea that there is something out there bigger than myself, right? I feel that when I have a connection with the people around me. I feel that in my role as a father. I feel that as a human being that wants to help people. I could be very inspired and very, very much in awe of everyday life and consider that a higher power, right? Without subscribing to an ancient dogma per se.
Yeah. Absolutely. We do have live shows. So if you are in the Austin area, September the 24th, 2023, then please continue to join us for our live broadcast of Talk Heathen and the Atheist Experience in studio. Talk Heathen will be hosted by Objectively Dan and Sophia Spiner. The Atheist Experience will be hosted by Objectively Dan and Jamie the Blind Limey. Doors open at noon. We hope to see you there. And please remember that parking can be quite limited around the Free Thought Library. So get there early if you want a parking space. But if you get there early, remember that you might not get out till late because you might get blocked in. So be willing to spend the day with lots of people from the atheist community of Austin, but definitely get yourself down there if you have the opportunity to. Well, we've got so many calls. Jimmy, do you want to kind of
I do. I'd like to circle back where we started and go with Stuart. He, him for me.
Stuart.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
What would you like to talk about?
Well, I was listening to the chap, I don't remember his name, Richard, but the guy that was on right at the start talking about his fear of hell. And I don't want to spend a lot of your time because I know this isn't the topic, but I just thought what I had to say might help. See, I was a very devout Christian for about 10 years. And then because of problems that I won't tell the story of, but I ended up being made very unwelcome by the church I was in. My problem there was not with the people, because they were very sincere people. It was that they had prayed to the Holy Spirit, and the Spirit had told them, well, basically something that wasn't true. Which is why when I left that church, I didn't choose another, because I thought, well, it's going to be the same Spirit, and I can't trust the Spirit anymore. So I spent about the next 2 years still believing, but thinking I was going to go to hell, which was terrifying. However, it did something really important for me. I no longer had to censor my thoughts. And because I didn't have to censor my thoughts, I was allowed to ask myself all of those questions that I don't normally ask or didn't normally ask. And eventually I was able to work out that it wasn't true. So what I would say to this guy is, don't self-censor. When you get the questions in your head, don't assume you're under spiritual attack or whatever. Think it through. And that's really all I wanted to say.
Yeah, that kind of behavior can be hard to come by, right? That is kind of a learned behavior that we're really taught throughout most of our lives. Those of us that were raised religion, that's something you absolutely can't do. So it's almost counterintuitive to go down that road. I would agree with you. That's why when I mentioned, it really takes strength in a way, and it really takes repetition. You're not going to get it right every time. Heck, I'm a new host here, and I make mistakes. I make mistakes that I have to constantly, remind myself not to do. So it's all about just kind of staying on course and maybe not deviating. Yeah. Once you've made your mind up and once you've decided, this is kind of silly or this can't be true, I would say stay on that course. And maybe he's listening and is grateful for your insight.
Well, I hope so. Because I will just add one more little bit. The reason I got into Christianity at all was following a split with my very first love, and I was absolutely devastated. And the Christians got me then at what we used to call ripe for harvest. And
you mean you were vulnerable?
Questioning. Yeah. And I was terrified of questioning for 10 years in case I went straight back there. And it was only that set of circumstances that allowed me to question and stick with it. And I'm so grateful for that because I've been free of it for 30 years now.
Well, congrats. I'm glad you called in and shared.
All right. Nice to speak with you.
Yes, Stuart, thank you very, very much for your call. I was a bit afraid when Stuart started talking that it might turn into lots of people on your side of the pond, Jimmy, not understanding us and us talking about racing whippets and wooking that bit with two Northern English accents on go. But we got out of that one. We've still got lots and lots of calls. Let's bring in Otari from Georgia, the country, who wants to talk about abortion. Otari.
Hello.
So you have opinions on abortion.
I want to talk about that abortion is murder. So my argument is that it has the characteristics of life, like response to environment, regulation, growth, etc. What would you say about it?
Why do you think it's murder?
Because it has characteristics of life, as I just said, like growth, ability to grow, reproduction, response to the environment, and etc.
It's not, Otari, it's not legally considered murder. So why do you think it's murder?
That's irrelevant. Legality has nothing to do with the fact of its factors.
Okay, Jimmy.
Laws can be defined.
Yeah, well.
So what would you say about the fact that it has properties of life?
So it has properties of life, and so therefore ending it is murder. So that I think the legal system that I was brought up in, and what Richard just said, where he comes from, murder or abortion is not synonymous with murder, despite having the properties of life. I think what you're trying to ascribe to it is, considering a fetus or an unborn child, no matter the state, no matter the length of the term that we're in, you're considering it all one and the same. The problem with that is we as a society, we as a world, this conversation has not yet been solved. It's still going on. We are in a kind of a milestone, I would say, in human intellect, where we are all kind of taking a look at technology and taking a look at the very nuanced circumstances that could lead to abortion of all kinds, in all stages, between all kinds of different people, and trying to figure out what's considered acceptable and what's not. Your very hard-lined approach, I think, alienates a lot of people from joining that conversation and criminalizes people who, are not really looking to do something bad. It would in the end criminalize medical professionals, criminalize people who might not be in the best position for safety wise. It could be at risk. The child could be at risk. And so these conversations have to go on, and hardlining it with the label of murder, kind of prevents us from progressing.
Do you think, Otari, that in all cases, abortion is bad? Otari, do you think that in all cases abortions are bad?
If by all cases you mean a direct termination of the pregnancy, then yes.
Okay, so and I know from previous conversations that you're a Christian. That's correct, isn't it?
Yes.
So why do you think that all abortions are bad when in Numbers 5:27 it's actually suggested that women should have an abortion in some circumstances?
I mean, I can answer that, but why are you switching the conversation? I wanted to talk about it biologically.
Right. Okay, so I know you don't want to talk about that, but I want to talk about that, and as it's my show, that's what we're going to be talking about. Unfortunately, if you if you think that abortions are bad in all kind of situations, why is it that in the Bible it seems that abortion is actually supported in some circumstances? Do you just not agree with the Bible?
Bible does not talk about abortion in those cases, and besides, you are not supposed to interpret it. I don't know if you are a Protestant beforehand, but
okay. So, Otari, if you're not supposed to interpret it, why is it that the Bible says abortion is okay, and you're against abortion in all cases?
It doesn't say that. And as we have seen with Protestants, we can't interpret the Bible because everyone will have the contradictory.
Well, you can interpret the Bible now.
We have the church.
So you can interpret the Bible when it suits you to interpret it.
We have the church established in the 5th century, and ever since then, abortion was condemned. First catechism.
So we just throw everything in the Old Testament out before the 5th century, then? Do we just dismiss the entire Bible before the entire Old Testament?
Well, Old Testament also condemns Bible. I mean, abortion in the sense that it says in First Commandment or Third Commandment, I think.
That's absolutely wonderful, Otari, but you said abortion was okay in all circumstances, and the Bible disagrees with you. So are you now saying that we should just throw everything in the Old Testament out because it's before the 5th century?
Your interpretation of it is wrong.
But it's not wrong, because the Bible specifically tells us that in some on some occasions abortion is okay. The actual thing it says is, if she had made herself impure and been unfaithful to her husband, this will be the result. When she is made to drink the water that brings a curse and causes bitter suffering, it will enter her abdomen, it will swell her womb and miscarry, and she will become a curse. That is what people who are faithful to God are told to do in that circumstance. That's not my interpretation. That is what the Bible says. It specifically gives instructions for carrying out abortions.
Abortion is, so who are you to tell us otherwise? But besides,
we're people that have
No,
voices and opinions. We're allowed to challenge this ancient book. And in Richard's case, he's not even challenging it. He's citing it. He's citing it as a source of information that actually goes against what you're saying. And so for you to ask him, well, who is he to bring this up, and who is he to comment on that? I mean, you should be able to explain your holy book in a way that Richard could understand if you think that his interpretation is wrong, which is, by the way, not even an interpretation. It's a word for word recital of what is in that book. So I don't want you to kind of, muddy our conversation by moving on. I think that you have reached a point where you have to justify this. Abortion is murder, in your opinion, in all cases, but God says abortion is okay. How do you rectify the differences between those two positions?
I don't know about those specific verses, but as I said, since our church teaches that abortion is wrong, then it can't be contradiction. There can be contradiction.
Well, your church teaches you that abortion is wrong, but you have the right to examine whether or not what you're being taught is actually correct. You don't have to sit back and say, well, so-and-so told me something, or this person that I trust told me something, so it has to be true. People are wrong all the time, and that's why we have to have these conversations. You are perfectly capable, and you have every right to have your own opinion after doing the work yourself and thinking for yourself, figuring out for you what is best for Otari. What does Otari believe? You don't have to just go and believe everything just by default because your leader says you have to believe it. That's not leadership, and that's not putting you in a position to come up with kind of your own thoughts. You have to be your own person.
Bible didn't come out of nowhere. It was proposed and defined by the church canonically. So how could it be?
How do we know that that's correct? Just because your church said that abortion is wrong, how do we know that your church is correct?
When it contradicts the Bible, I might add.
True. Yeah. Otari, is it possible that some of the people who you look to as leaders could be wrong sometimes?
No.
No. Okay. Well, we're in a dilemma, my friend. We are in a dilemma because by giving somebody that kind of power, you are basically...
God protect them infallibly.
Yeah, so again, what I was saying...
Talk about religion. I wanted to ask about biology.
Yeah, we've kind of. I think we've done with talking, Otari. I think you really need to go away and seriously consider why your beliefs and the beliefs of those people you look up to as religious leaders directly contradict the Bible. Because it seems like the people you're looking up to are putting themselves above God, and the orthodoxy of those religious decisions are putting themselves above God, who directly instructs that a woman should go and drink the water that brings a curse and causes bitter suffering to cause her an abortion. It's in the Bible, my friend. I suggest you go away and study it. Thank you, Otari, for your call. I'm sorry that we didn't get to the subjects you wanted to talk about, but I think it's very important to kind of point out where you're probably going quite wrong in relation to the things you believe in. I think when both myself and Jimmy asked Otari questions, I think his silence spoke far more words than any of us could have spoken. That kind of moment of realization. Otari, go and read the Bible. Go and read and understand the Bible. And then instead of calling us week after week, giving weak positions as to why you believe in God and why you think abortion is wrong, go and question the people who are making the rules in your church and contradicting your holy book, and go and question them as to why they're doing that, because I think you need a conversation with those people more than you need with us. On the same subject, we're going to bring Jack in from Florida, who also thinks that abortion is murder. Jack.
Hi there. Hi there.
Hello.
Hi. So
Hey, Jack.
I saw the poll, and I kind of wish that I chose other, because I don't think it's murder per se, but I do think it's a killing human being, and I think it could be justified.
You think it can be justified by doing performing abortion?
Yeah, I'm for abortion personally.
Okay.
You know, but I think it is a killing of a human being. I think it's intellectually dishonest to consider a fetus not human or not living. It is living, and it is human. And I think it's okay to kill them, because I think it's better for a child to grow up in a home in which they're wanted. I think it's preferable for society for that to happen, rather than them growing up like in an orphanage or something.
I think the problem, I have no kind of problem in as much as you're saying it's living as such. I think I think killing is a different thing, because definitionally killing refers to somebody who has been born. And I think that's probably where we're going to have, I'm going to have the most pushback on you, is that by definition it is not killing. It is, it's a living thing that is relying on someone else to sustain its life, and that person choosing not to continue to sustain its life is not killing it by definition.
Okay. How did you come to that definition that you need to be born in order to be killed?
That is just the definition of.
No, I don't think that's necessarily the definition.
The definition of killing is one person taking another person's life.
Right, but a fetus is alive.
It's not considered a person. It's not considered an independent person while it's reliant on its mother. According
to who? What? Some legal standard? Is that what you're referring to?
I don't make the rules, mate. I'm just giving you the definition of killing. An act of causing death, especially deliberately. But it's to a living.
If we're talking like a legal standard, a person.
I want to take a step back for a second. I want to take a step back because I want to stay on this idea of killing. In my opinion, okay, and I'm not quoting legal definitions per se. I think killing, just through my human experience, has a negative connotation, right? It sounds almost intentional. It sounds a little bit malicious. We're not killing in abortion necessarily, are we? Or are we terminating, which I think has a little bit of a different connotation. And I think that's where words matter, because these approaches that we take to examining whether an abortion should be or should not be carried out. First of all, again, I want to caveat that with, I am not the expert in the room, and I'm never going to be in a position to have to do so. So we really need to put that in the hands and in the minds of the people who are more qualified to do so. Right. So if somebody has to terminate a pregnancy, well, first of all, we've gone over this already. It could be a very difficult decision. It could be a matter of life and death. And I don't think that the people who are really affected by that, or may not be affected by it, really want to consider that they're killing their unborn child. it's a little bit of a word game. You have to play with it. But if you think it's justified, then what's the problem really with having to terminate a pregnancy in cases where, you know, it might be understandable?
I don't see any problem with abortion at all. Like if a woman wants to terminate her pregnancy and it's because she doesn't want to have a child right now, or maybe it's because of incest, or because of rape.
Yeah.
All those things are fine with me. All I'm saying is that it's just a killing. Like I'm okay with it. I just consider it a killing, a justified killing. That's all.
And we can go back and forth over maybe the definition of killing, but I think on the whole, we're not really in disagreement. You know, I think there's circumstances where, yeah, we understand that abortion might be necessary, or in, you know, many cases, most cases, it's somebody else's decision, not ours, not us men, for sure. But you know, I don't know where this conversation goes after that. I tend to agree with you.
That sounds cool. I mean, I was just in the chat earlier, and some people were talking about how, but somebody actually said that a fetus wasn't even human, which I was like, dude, it's not a cat, you know.
Well, we're having, like I said, you know, so we're having that. Like, I think this is such an awesome conversation to have. I really do. I think, like, in human history, we are in a period where we are like defining where life starts. You know, we should be free to have that conversation and to philosophize, if you will, over, you know, this kind of critical line of questioning. I think it's critical in many ways. But we have to keep fighting that fight and, you know, not have our hands tied. And I think that's kind of the dilemma we're in. So yeah, I mean, of course it's not a cat. Honestly, Jack, with all due respect, I think it's a little ridiculous. You know, we are talking about human life. It's just that, you know, at what process does it become life? I think it's a really kind of inspiring conversation to have. And those are just my thoughts on that. But killing, terminating, you know, for whatever reason, these are decisions that are the experts to make, and for the owner of that body that is giving that potential life.
Right. I do have a question for you guys, though. Suppose there's a pregnant woman, right? Suppose she is almost to term, and somebody shoots her in the torso, kills the unborn child or fetus or whatever you want to call it, and she survives. Should she be charged with 2 murders, or like an attempted murder of her and like the murder of the child, or should it just be the attempted murder of her? What do you guys? This is not
an easy answer. You know, I think with a question like that, you're looking for an easy answer, and when we find ourselves in that situation, we are in a courtroom. There is evidence. There is right to a speedy trial. There are all kinds of things that have to be taken into account, and so, you know, I can just say that I hope nobody's ever in that position to where they feel they have to do that.
Sure.
Unfortunately, we are able to cite situations where people put themselves at risk in order to get an abortion because that right and that ability to have that conversation with their medical provider has been taken away from them. So I really can't go down this road of you know, if this and if that. It's unfortunate all the way around.
Yeah. Okay, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I appreciate that call, and you know, I think Jack, it is one of those things. It's kind of, and I'll give you a little bit of pushback at the beginning of the call, but it's kind of like one of those, you know, what is the definition of atheism thing? I think there are so many subtleties and nuances to it, and as we said with a couple of the callers earlier on the subject of abortion. It's not just a case that the pregnant person remains in the same state and the fetus remains in the same state throughout the whole process. You know,
Right.
things are growing and changing all the time, and this, I think, law kind of reflects this, and definitions reflect this in, you know, by giving the idea that we have 3 trimesters and 3 different stages of kind of growth for the fetus and things like that. And you know, it is very, very nuanced, and you know, it's an interesting conversation to have, and I'm kind of glad we've had it today, and we've had an array of voices and opinions on it. And I really appreciate your voice at the end, because I kind of, when I read the call notes, I kind of thought you might be another like, oh, you know, abortion is murder, dead against it. And the fact that you know, it's just kind of the definition and the nuance of the definition you wanted to talk about, when you're actually kind of on the same page as both myself and Jimmy, I think, with a lot of the things surrounding abortion. Anyway, it's interesting to have these conversations, and you know, it gets people thinking. It really, really does get people thinking, and I think that's important. So I appreciate your voice. Is there anything else you wanted to kind of touch on just before we let you go?
Yeah. So I used to be a theist for a long time, and atheism is like kind of a newer thing for me. I started reading Bart Ehrman and Richard Dawkins and listening to debates on YouTube and stuff, and it kind of shattered my worldview. So I was just wondering, what do you guys think is like the meaning to like us even existing? Or is that too much to ask? I think that probably is.
I mean, I don't think it's too much to ask. I think it's a really, really good question. But we are very much at the end of the show, and it's kind of a completely different subject. So what I would encourage you to do is keep that question in mind and give us a call back, Jack, because it is a really, really good question. And I would like you to kind of phone and ask it where you can be given the appropriate time from the host to actually give you a good and an honest answer and an in-depth answer on the subject. So kind of give us a call back when you can, next week if possible, if not as soon as you can, and keep the question in mind. We've had some good calls on abortion today. I think it's not just been a case of having like lots of people phone up with the same opinion. I think every caller has brought something slightly different to the table, and I really, really appreciate that.
Yeah, this has been great. You know, I want to circle back and just say that, you know, something that you said, the silence, Otari's silence. I hope to hear back from him. I hope that he can fill in those silent gaps with us. You know, I would like to hear back from him in the future, and I hope he's watching the rest of the show.
Yeah, me too. And I think calls like that as well, and we've said it many, many times, that calls like that, even if the caller doesn't kind of get it, it gives people who are listening a chance to think things over, who might be in the same position of Otari, but not from the kind of position of talking to us directly, so they can sit back and really think about it. Okay, so have you said to yourself, I really love the content the ACA creates, but I wish there was a way I could get it all of the time? Well, then we've got you covered. We now have 2 24/7 live streams. AXP TV delivers a constant stream of shows, clips, and specials from over 26 seasons of the Atheist Experience. I'm always kind of flabbergasted every time I say that, because it has been going for so long and it's helped so many people over that time. And now Heathen TV provides you with clips from Talk Heathen. Watch or simply listen to your favorite hosts and discover some hosts you've never heard of. Visit tiny.cc/AXPTV and tiny.cc/HeathenTV to join in on the fun. The prompt for this week's question is, what is a sin Jesus didn't intend to die for? Reply in the comments and tune in at the beginning of next week's episode to hear the top 3 answers. And we have different ways to support the ACA and Talk Heathen. Like the video and subscribe to the channel. We have the Brick fundraiser You can make a lasting impression on the ACA by participating in our brick fundraiser. I'm really excited about that one. I love that idea. Visit tiny.cc/ACA bricks for more information. You can become a member by clicking the join button below the video. You can support us on Patreon at tiny.cc/patreonth. And we now have a channel that houses all of the shows of the ACA in podcast form. Visit tiny.cc/AEN podcasts. You can become a part of the Talk Heathen community in our fan-run Facebook page at tiny.cc/FBTHG. And if you would like to continue the discussion after the show, join us in Discord, where our fan-run Discord server at ACD Discord, tiny.cc/ACD Discord. And both myself and Jimmy and our backup host will be there to answer your questions. We, of course, do not do this on our own. We have the fantastic, the amazing, the wonderful, the very intelligent and far more attractive than myself crew who bring this show to you every week. Look at those beautiful, beautiful people. We love all of them.
And pets.
We love under the cat and crew dog as well, a new addition to the crew dog, and we love all of them. Thank you, you guys. We couldn't do this show without you. Let's throw some love rings out there. You viewers, I'm going to do the magic. That's it, do the magic. And you viewers, you are the people who make this show happen. I've just mentioned that when we talk, we're sometimes talking to you out there, and not specifically the callers who call in when it comes to some difficult subjects. And you are the ones, we get your feedback. You can email us. We do get your feedback. It gives me so much kind of vitality and wants me to do this when we get that feedback from you. Even if it's stuff that's not so positive, it kind of informs us on the stuff you want to hear. But we get overwhelming good feedback, and I really, really appreciate that. I read through all the comments every single week, and all the emails we get, I read everything. So, and I do appreciate that. And it's you guys, showing your support every week, tuning in to listen to us, who make this show happen. And I very, very much appreciate all of you. So whether or not you do believe, we do not hate you. We are just not convinced, and we will see you next week.
We want the truth, so watch Truth Wanted live, Friday at 7 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTW and call into the show at 512-991-9242, or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/calltw.